Admonitions for Parents. Lessons by our Holy Father St. John Chrysostom on raising children. 1. Having children is a matter of nature, but raising them and educating them in the virtues is a matter of mind and will. By the duty of raising them, I mean not only not allowing them to die of hunger, as people often limit their obligation toward their children to doing. For this is needed neither books nor rubrics, for nature speaks of it quite loudly. I am speaking of the concern for educating children's hearts in virtue and piety, a sacred duty which cannot be transgressed without thereby becoming guilty of the children's murder, in a certain sense. This obligation belongs to fathers as well as mothers. There are fathers who spare nothing in order to secure for their children teachers of pleasure and to pander to their cravings as wealthy heirs, but so that the children would be Christians, so that they would exercise themselves in piety, is of little need to them. O criminal blindness! It is this very crude inattention that is responsible for all the disorder that causes our society to groan. Let us suppose that you have acquired large property for them. However, if they do not know how to conduct themselves sensibly, this property will not last long with them. It will be squandered, it will perish with its owners, and will be their most grievous inheritance. Your children will always be sufficiently wealthy if they receive from you a good upbringing that is able to order their moral life and behavior. Thus, strive not to make them rich, but rather to make them pious masters of their passions, rich in virtues. Teach them not to think up illusory needs, reckoning their worth according to worldly standards. Attentively watch their deeds, their acquaintances, and their attachments, and do not expect any mercy from God if you do not fulfill this duty. If the Apostle commands us to take more care for others than for ourselves, and if we are guilty when we neglect their benefit, then is it not a much greater guilt when this concerns those who are so near to us? Was it not I, the Lord will say to us, who gave place to these children in your family? Was it not I who entrusted them to your care, making you masters, guardians, and judges over them? I gave you complete authority over them. I placed all care for their upbringing in your hands. You will tell me that they did not want to bend their necks to the yoke, that they threw it off. But this should have been averted from the very beginning. You should have mastered their first impressions, placed the reins on them before they had the power to break away from them. You should have bent their young souls under the yoke of duty, accustomed them to it, educated them in accordance with it, bound the wound when it first opened. You should have uprooted the tares when they first began to sprout around the young plant, and not have waited until they put down deep roots, when the passions have become uncontrollable and untamable through gradual strengthening in their formation. The wise Sirach says, "Hast thou children? Instruct them, and bow down their neck from their youth." But the Lord does not only prompt us with this command through the lips of his prophet, he even takes our side, supporting the fulfillment of this commandment with the fearsome punishment that awaits those children who do not submit to the authority of their parents. Every man who speaks evil of his father or of his mother, let him die the death. He punishes with death those who become guilty before you, and you look tepidly at these sins that they commit against the highest possible authority. They are rebelling against God himself, transgressing his commandments, and you look at this without the least displeasure, without the slightest criticism of your children. What does he have to lose from their offense? Nothing. But you, why should you not fear for your own selves? For whoever abandons the Lord will never respect either his own father or himself. Children who are submissive and faithful to God in their obedience to his law will have found an abundant source of happiness, even in this temporal life. A poor man with Christian morals inspires respect and love from others. Meanwhile, with an evil and depraved heart, all your riches will not save you from the displeasure and aversion of everyone around you. The youth to whom you give a good upbringing will not only enjoy general respect, he will also become dearer to you yourselves. Your attachment to him will not be a mere natural attraction. It will be the fruit of his virtue. For this, during your old age, you will in turn receive from him the services of his filial love. He will be your support. For just as those who do not revere the Lord also have contempt for their own parents, those who revere God, the Father of all men, will have every respect for those who gave them life. Let us suppose that you fulfill the commandment of the law in every other respect, but being unfaithful in this one commandment, you will be severely punished. Listen to this proof taken from the history of one ancient people. You will immediately see to what terrible punishment those fathers subjected themselves who neglect their children's upbringing. Among the Jews was one priest who was respected for his meek character. His name was Eli. This priest had 2 sons who had given themselves over to every vice. The father did not concern himself with this and paid little attention, or, if their depravity, having reached the limit, forced him to reproach them, he did it without the necessary fervor and authority. He should have punished them severely, thrown them out of his presence, taken strict measures in order to put a stop to the outrage. He did nothing of the sort. He limited himself to giving them a form of admonition. Nay, my sons, for the report which I hear is not good. Do not so. Is this what he should have said? They offended the one to whom they owe their existence, and he still accepts them as part of his family. His admonition was useless and vain. No, this demanded not an admonition, but a strong lesson, severe torments, a treatment as strong as the evil. He should have used fear to root their young hearts out of this blindness. An admonition? Eli's sons had no lack of these. O useless words! O criminal meekness by which they became victims! A war began, and the wretches became the spoils of their enemy. When their father learned of their misfortune, he fell to the ground and, smashing his head, died. I have just told you that fathers who do not take care to give their children a Christian upbringing are murderers of their own children. Is it not true? Who should Eli blame for his son's death? Himself. True, the enemy's sword slew them, but the neglect of their false father directed the blow. Abandoned by heavenly help, they appeared naked against the arrows of the Philistines. The father destroyed himself and them. Meanwhile, we see the same thing before ourselves daily. How many parents there are who do not want to take upon themselves this labor of correcting their unsubmissive and unruly children. They are as if afraid to upset their children by reining in with stern words the vicious tendencies to which they have submitted themselves. What is the outcome? Their disorder increases. Their impunity leads them to criminal offenses. They are brought to trial, and the wretches die at the hands of the executioner. You refused your personal rights over them and committed them to the severity of civil punishment, and human justice wielded its harsh rights over them. You are afraid to humiliate them with some light punishment in your presence. But what horrible dishonor shall befall you when your son is no longer around, and the father, hounded everywhere by accusing glares, no longer dares to show himself anywhere. Therefore, I beg you to take care for the good upbringing of your children. First of all, think of the salvation of their souls. God has placed you as the heads and teachers over your families. It is your duty to watch, and to watch continually after the behavior of your wife and children. Listen to St. Paul. If your wives, says he, want to learn anything, let them learn it from their husbands. Educate your children in the teaching and instructions of the Lord. Imitate Job, who continually looked after his children and offered sacrifices for mercy towards any secret misdeeds they might have committed. Imitate Abraham, who concerned himself less with the acquisition of riches than with keeping of God's law by every member of his house, and about whom the Lord witnessed. For I know that he will order his sons, and his house after him, and they will keep the ways of the Lord to do justice and judgment. David, when he was near death, wanted to leave Solomon the surest inheritance. He called him to himself in order to repeat the following wise instructions: that the Lord may confirm his word which he spoke, saying, If thy children shall take heed to their way to walk before me in truth with all their heart, I promise thee, saying, There shall not fail thee a man on the throne of Israel. 3 Kings 2:4. These are the examples that we should follow during our lives and with our final breath. If good fathers would strive to give their children a good upbringing, then we would need neither laws, judges, courts, nor punishments. Executioners exist because we have no morality. We spare neither labors nor means in order to teach our children secular sciences so that they can serve well the earthly authorities. Only the knowledge of the holy faith, the service of the heavenly King, are a matter of indifference to us. We allow them to attend spectacles, but we care little whether they go to church and stand within it reverently. We demand an account from them of what they learned in their secular institutes. Why do we not demand an account from them of what they heard in the Lord's house? Having made the necessary exhortation to children, the apostle addresses himself also to the fathers, saying, You fathers, bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Do you want your child to be obedient? Then from the beginning bring him up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Do you think that it is not necessary for a child to listen to the Scriptures? The first thing he will hear from them will be, Honor thy father and mother, and immediately you will begin to reap your reward. Do not say, Bible is for monks. Am I turning my child into a monk? No. It is not necessary for him to be a monk. Make him into a Christian. Why are you afraid of something so good? It is necessary for everyone to know scriptural teachings, and this is especially true for children. Not knowing divine truths, they do know something of the pagan stories, learning from them about wondrous lives, about heroes in their sight, who served the passions and were afraid of death. Such an example is Achilles, inconsolably dying for his mistress, another who gives himself over to drunkenness, and on and on. Therefore your children need remedies for these things, in the retribution and teachings of the Lord. We are so concerned with our children's schooling. If only we were equally zealous in bringing them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And then we wonder why we reap such bitter fruit when we have raised our children to be insolent, licentious, impious, and vulgar. May this never happen. Instead, let us heed the blessed Paul's admonition to bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Let us give them a pattern to imitate. From their earliest years, let us teach them to study the Bible. He repeats this over and over again, you say. We are sick of listening to it. Never will I stop doing my duty. Why do you refuse to imitate the holy men and women of old? Tell me, especially you mothers. Think of Hannah's example. Look at what she did. She brought Samuel, her only son, to the temple when he was only an infant. Who among you would not rather have a son like Samuel than one who became king of the whole world 10,000 times over? But it is impossible, you say, for my son ever to become as great as he. Why is it impossible? Because you do not really want it. You will not entrust him to the one who is able to make him great. And who is that? God. Hannah commended Samuel into the hands of God. The high priest Eli had no real ability to form him, since he even failed to form his own children. It was the mother's faith and zeal that made everything possible. He was her first and only child. She did not know if she would ever have another, yet she never said, I will wait until he grows up. He should have a taste of worldly pleasures, during his childhood at least. No, she rejected all these thoughts, for she had only one object, how from the very beginning she could dedicate her heart's delight to God. Be ashamed, you men, at the wisdom of this woman. She gave Samuel to God, and with God she left him, and thus her marriage was blessed more than ever, because her first concern was for spiritual things. She dedicated the first fruits of her womb to God and obtained many more children in return. She saw Samuel honored even in this life. If men return honor for honor, will not God do much more? He gives so much even to those who do not honor him at all. How long are we to be mere lumps of flesh? How long will we cling to the ground? Let everything take second place to our care for our children, our bringing them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. If from the beginning we teach them to love true wisdom, they will have greater wealth and glory than riches can provide. If a child learns a trade, or is highly educated for a lucrative profession, all this is nothing compared to the art of detachment from riches. If you want to make your child rich, teach him this. He is truly rich who does not desire great possessions or surround himself with wealth, but who requires nothing. This is how to discipline and teach your child. This is the greatest of riches. Do not worry about giving him an influential reputation for worldly wisdom, but ponder deeply how you can teach him to think lightly of this life's passing glories. Thus he will become truly renowned and glorious. Whether you are poor or rich, you can do this. These lessons are not learned from a skillful professor, but from divine revelation. Do not ask how he can enjoy a long life here, but how he can enjoy an infinite and eternal life in the age to come. Give him the great things, not the little things. Do not strive to make him a clever orator, but teach him to love true wisdom. He will not suffer if he lacks clever words, but if he lacks wisdom, all the rhetoric in the world cannot help him. A pattern of life is what is needed, not empty speeches. Character, not cleverness. Deeds, not words. These things will secure the kingdom and bestow God's blessing. Do not sharpen his tongue, but purify his soul. I do not mean that worldly learning is worthless and to be ignored, but it should not be an exclusive preoccupation.